Hello, Garland Nixon here with Margaret Kimberly. She is the Black Agenda Report. She's an editor and senior columnist, and we've got a lot to talk about. Trump is here. That's part of the conversation. The Democrats are gone. That's part of the conversation. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with Margaret Kimberly. As you know, she's over at Black Agenda Report. They're doing very, very good work, all kinds of interesting and articles there. And they got Black Agenda Report radio and lots of stuff. They've been around for a long time doing great. Oh, my gosh, my table. Okay, so let's talk. Weird. We'll start with the Democrats. We'll jump back and forth. Joe Biden pardoned his whole family. You know, after, what is it? No one is above the law. Remember that? Oh, that's what we heard on MSNBC and CNN and the Washington Post. No one is above the law. Then he pardons Hunter Biden for everything for the last 10 years. And what's interesting about these Joe Biden pardons, usually, even Bill Clinton, Mark Rich did a crime, he's pardoned for the crime. Joe Biden just has a broad brush. Whatever you may or may not have done for the last however long, you're pardoned for it. It almost seems like it's illegal, but nothing's illegal when the president does it, right? What are your thoughts on this? I don't know what to say, Margaret.
Well, we have bipartisan corruption, don't we? We can say Trump, as he promised, he pardoned everyone convicted for their actions on January 6, 2021. But they were convicted. And to your point, these people were convicted of something. You may have varying opinions about it. But he convicted people who were found guilty of something. Biden, in effect, made his family look guilty, made Fauci look guilty. What are you pardoning them for? I didn't even know there was such a thing. I thought you pardoned a conviction. But to say preemptively that this person or that person can't be charged, I was not aware that that's something that was possible. And Biden also, but he didn't pardon, he commuted the sentences of 2,500, I think it was 2,500 people who had been found guilty of drug offenses. And he should have done that the same time he pardoned his son. I think that pardon would have gone down a little easier. But we just see corruption. Now, the defense is Republicans can come after them. Come after them for what? What do Republicans have on his entire family? What do they have on Fauci? We have a lack of transparency with Fauci, I believe, about the origins of COVID, about work that he took out of the country. There are a lot of questions and, frankly, not enough good answers, in my opinion. So I can understand why he did that, but it looks bad. And so Biden leaves office as Genocide Joe, who pardoned people who, as far as we knew, weren't even guilty of anything.
Yes, and just so you'll know, I don't know if you have a gain adjust on your mic, but a lot of people are saying you're a lot louder than me, so I don't know if there is a gain adjusted on your
Let
mic.
me turn down my volume. I will do that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little too hot. Am I less hot now?
I can't tell.
You can't tell?
I don't know if that's the volume adjust for you, what you're hearing, or the volume adjust for what everyone else is hearing. At any rate, we will continue. Okay. Everyone, I guess you'll have to play with the volume on your computers if it doesn't work, but it's usually gain somewhere in there, might gain under settings. At any rate, because like on here, if I go to settings and then I go to audio.
Well, I'm resetting my mic.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's better.
What's that?
Is it better now? Or you can't tell? You said other people are saying it.
Yeah, there's well, I turned it down, but if you look down in StreamYard where it says settings, if you see that there's a thing
Yeah, I've adjusted it.
mic
So I
volume.
I brought it down.
Okay, good. Okay,
The
let's
mic.
yeah,
So that
people saying
should
it's
be
better.
better.
Excellent,
Maybe I'll
excellent.
just so people just keep telling me how I sound so God can give me
Yes,
instructions.
yes. Okay, all that being said, I lost the last part. What was it? Okay. Here's the other thing about it. If I know this person was found guilty of some minor drug, what of some minor drug offense or drug or whatever it was, I know what I'm dealing with. When you do a sweeping pardon, the implication is two things. Number one, you're concerned about the person being found guilty of something. Number two, you don't want us to know what it is. I don't know. In law, there's a term called a creeping admission, right? A creeping admission is this. Well, Garland, were you at the murder scene? No, but we got video. Oh, okay. Well, I was there, but I didn't really have a knife. We've got the knife with your fingerprints on. Oh, okay. Well, I had my knife. You know what I mean? A creeping admission. I will only admit to what you can prove. Once you show me you got me, I'll admit to that, and I'll keep denying. But if you show me that we got you on something, I'll admit. Right? The old creeping admission. This is kind of in effect a creeping admission because what Joe Biden is saying is they committed crimes, but I ain't gonna tell you what they are. And if you find out what they are, one by one, I've already pardoned the person for it. So, do you really want to waste your time looking for the crimes, knowing that you can't charge them? Number one. Number two, I don't have to tell you what the crimes are. I can say they didn't even commit crimes, but you kind of really know that they did. You know what I mean? And I'll only, as long as you don't find them, we'll pretend that there is none. I don't know what you're talking about. All right, we found a crime. All right, you got me on that one then. That's the way it comes across to me, Margaret. Just this insidious, we're criminals. But unless you absolutely prove it, we'll admit that we're criminals, but we won't exactly admit what the crime. It's just terrible and insidious what he did.
Well, it is, and it's. I know a lot of conservatives. They talked about the Biden crime family, and it always seemed like some silly thing. But maybe it's not so silly. I know there were implications that members of his family, they use their connections with him. His brother had some overseas connection. We all know about Hunter Biden. So it does not look good. I'll just sum up that way. In short, I think Joe Biden leaves office as a disgraced figure. He's the genocide president. He is the man in cognitive decline who had to be kicked out. And as some people claim, he ruined the plan to have an open convention so that whoever emerged, Kamala Harris or whomever, would have some legitimacy. And I think this is just one more nail in the coffin of his legacy. And all they're left with is to say over and over again, Joe Biden's a good man. No, he's not. If he was, you wouldn't have to keep saying it. He was committed to genocide. That to me should be the biggest excuse me, it's the thing I will remember most about his legacy. And Donald Trump, whatever you may say about him, is the one who ended the worst bloodshed in Gaza. Of course, Israel being Israel, now they're attacking the West Bank and turning that into a prison. But this endless giving Israel impunity, giving them weapons, allowing them to ethnically cleanse Gaza. It's Trump who played the biggest role in bringing that to an end. So that to me is Biden's legacy. He leaves office as a weak president who, and one of the reasons Trump made that move is that Biden was trying to stick him with the war against Iran. He was Blinken or Jake Sullivan, one or both of them, were trying to convince Biden to join Israel in attacking Iran. The plan fell apart in part because Trump won, also because Iran forged a new, not exactly an alliance, but an agreement with Russia, which complicated things. But Trump knew about it. He was going to walk into office in a war situation, and he did not like that. So that's Biden's legacy to me, and it's a pretty sorry one, in my opinion.
The other thing is, and this is something that not a lot of people are talking about. That it's about Trump or Biden, whatever. He left to say the Democratic Party is left in tatters would be charitable, and part of it is what we were just talking about. This claim of the moral high ground that the liberals have done for so long. We stand for this and that. They always stand for the good things. And now people look at them and they're like, you committed a genocide. You allied with Nazis. Joe Biden literally said the reason that he ran was because of Charlottesville and he saw those Nazis. And what did he do? He allied himself with Nazis. No man is above the law. We have to go. And I looked at the charges against Trump and I'm like, I have problems with a lot of these charges. You know what I mean? I'm like, come on, you got to be kidding me. You're gonna. I mean, some of the things that they charged him with, it just didn't look good. But what they said, in light of people who, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, come on, you're really charging somebody with that. What they said was, basically, we had no choice. We thought there were violations of the law. No man is above the law. All of that. And now you look at them, you're like, you pardon everybody. You were the good guys, but you committed a genocide. You were for looking out for the minorities and the underprivileged communities, and you were allied with the worst white supremacists on earth. You were opposed to anti-Semitism. You're allied with Nazis. It's like everything that they claimed to stand for, claimed over the course of the Biden administration, was proven that they were not false, exactly the opposite.
Yes, absolutely. It's you're talking about Ukraine. These it's kind to call them right wingers. That's an understatement. These are people who are Nazis, going back to the fact that half of Ukraine fought with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany in World War II, and the other half were collaborators. And to this day, that ideology prevails among many Ukrainians. And that is absolutely true. He was all in for Ukraine. And speaking of Ukraine, he is the one who instigated it, attacking the Donbass, daring Putin to go into Ukraine. Then, when the Russians held peace talks with Ukraine, talks hosted by Turkey, they were scuttled by the U.S. and the U.K. And so now we have, the war is pretty much won by Russia. That's agreed by everyone. But there's still this commitment to send money, to send arms, to force Ukraine to conscript 18-year-olds, to get people killed. And they're left with lies about North Korean soldiers whom nobody's ever seen, and trying to make us believe that there's anything there that can turn the tide. It's billions of dollars of our money used in this futile and dangerous effort to counter Russia. Billions of our dollars used for ethnic cleansing. Lest we forget, it was the Biden administration that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, an act of terrorism against a supposed ally, against Germany. So when you look at Biden's record, we've been talking about foreign policy, but the same is true. Domestic policy, it's just failure. There was no Build Back Better. What did they talk about? Some student loans were forgiven. I'm happy for those people, but it's nothing like what people needed. No increase in the minimum wage, claiming to be a pro-union president, but breaking a railroad strike, the signature legislation failing. This is a failed administration. And he didn't use the powers he did have. In 24 hours, how many executive orders did Trump sign? Biden used that very sparingly. So his legacy is in tatters, and the Democratic Party, I see these people online saying Trump doesn't have a mandate because he only won X percent of the vote, not quite 50%. He doesn't have a mandate. He won. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. He has control of both houses of Congress. He won. And the Democratic Party is left once again to try to figure out who they can get to get people back on board. I'm not going to say they're dead. I wish they were, to be perfectly honest. They aren't, but they're very, very damaged. So it's a very sad day. This, this fake opposition just folded up like a cheap lawn chair, and Trump gets to do what he wants on anything. Some things he really can't do, like uh, you know denying birthright citizenship to certain people. That's a constitutional amendment. In the absence of that, it's not going to hold up. But he's got the power and he's using it. So he has the bully pulpit of the presidency, which he's not afraid to use. So, he enters office. He enters as a winner, very confident. The charges, you brought up these various charges against him. I think they were bogus. The case in New York City, people talk about 34 count conviction. He's a 34-time convicted felon. I think that case stunk to high heaven. There was no reason to bring it unless you thought in doing so you were going to keep Donald Trump out of politics, which didn't even work. So they abused the judicial system to try to hurt him politically. It didn't hurt him. I believe in the minds of some people, the fact that he ran anyway helped to build his profile and helped him to win again. So that's where we are now.
Yeah, everything they did was in tatters. Now, here's the other part, and I think this is critical. I want to get your thoughts on this. We are at our very heart anti-war people. We're anti-empire. We're anti-interventionists. Let people have the government they want and grow the way they want. Okay. Joe once and finally locked the Democrats in with John Bolton. Literally, John Bolton wrote an article and some other people supporting Kamala Harris, right? She ran around with the Cheney clan, right? He finally cemented the relationship between the Democrats and the worst, filthiest, most brutal neocons on earth, right? And they were unabashed about it, right? And so they were like, no, we have to. And she even went on, oh, no, we've got to continue to support Israel no matter what. And no, we've got to stand up to Putin, blah, blah, blah. Okay, Trump won. Trump comes out, this thing's over. What, we don't know the details, but it's over. And everybody says, well, why the hell didn't Joe Biden and the Democrats do that? Okay. Now, after what happened, at first I said, he'll never end this thing in Ukraine. After what happened in Israel, what happens now? If Trump comes out and he gives a speech and he says, I'm going to be the peacemaker. I'm going to have a big army, but we're not going to use it. I'm not. So Trump comes out as the second coming of friggin' Gandhi here, for God's sake, right? I'm not saying that's who he is. But based on the position that the Democrats have stated, it's a moral position. We're standing up against Putin because we're the good guys and we're standing up for these plucky little Nazis who are, pushing back against imperialism, right? We're standing up for the wonderful democracy of Israel against these brutal terrorists of, small children who have to have their arms and legs blown off. So they took this moral position. Trump comes in. If they think they're in bad shape now. If this guy ends the war in Ukraine, which it's always popular. Wars in America start, and a couple years later, when people realize they've been lied into this war, it becomes unpopular, and it's good to get out of it, right? If Trump gets out of both of these wars, I think they're finished. I think everybody's got to say, Democrats, and not just Trump, the rank and file. You know what I remember? They passed $60 billion or something to go to Ukraine. And all of these Democrats were celebrating, waving these blue and yellow flags. All of them, Black Caucus, Latino Caucus, Women's Caucus. They all joined. The Democrats have joined in lockstep behind the worst warmongers. If Trump comes up and ends these things, how did they even limp into the midterms, Margaret?
I don't know how they do. It depends on if Trump overreaches on his agenda. I think that's their only hope, frankly. Now, on Ukraine, you never know with Trump, because most Republicans were questioning their support of Ukraine, questioning whether that last tranche of money last spring, whether that authorization should go through. But Trump came in at the last minute, and he's the one who did the deal. Got Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, to go along with sending more money. They quieted the few Republicans who said, wait a minute, I thought we didn't want to put any more money into Ukraine. So you never know with him. He's always a question mark. It's not clear what he's going to do. So first he was like, I can end it, during very Trumpian, and one phone call, just one day, it's going to be over, which, anybody with any sense knew that wasn't going to be true. But he is going to talk to Putin. And I think that's very important. He's going to talk to Putin. He's going to talk to Xi. And Biden was such a disaster internationally. They're glad they prefer seeing Trump to seeing Biden. So the fact that they're open to talk to Putin, to talk about Ukraine, there is some hope that this can be over. But you never know with him. I'm not convinced he's going to do it. But
here's my point. Not whether he will or won't. We have no idea what will happen. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, as an intellectual exercise, which is based on what we've seen, it's possible. Anything's possible. Mm-hmm. If Donald Trump says, all right, I'm getting a deal and we're going to, the Russians said yes and blah, 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 whatever. What do the Democrats do? Do they push back and say, no, 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 we're fighting against this. We've got to stop Donald Trump from getting the deal. You see, if they don't, then they abandon the position that they've had all along, that there was a moral imperative that they support Ukraine. If they do, then they prove that they were lying all along. So right now they're quiet. As Trump, if you notice, Trump says, I'm trying to get a deal. You look at the Democrats, what do you think? They're hiding under the table. You know what I mean? How do they take a position for proving that they lied the whole time when they said there was a moral imperative, or against when they know the American people want out of this war? They're in an untenable position, a quandary, dare I say.
Yes, very much so. They, as you said, they can't claim the moral high ground at all on many issues. They just can't. It's if he stops a war, and Democrats are as much warmongers as Republican. This idea that party is like the peace party is nonsense. Americans who want peace tend to be Democrats, but that used to be true. But now I find liberals are, even more eager. Russiagate, that whole fraud, turned a lot of liberals into hawks. And so they may trot that out again. Oh, Putin put him in office and, whatever. They may try that. But if the end result of him talking to Putin is that this conflict ends and he tells people, now your money is going to be back home. I'm going to use it to help you. That is a winner. And there'll be a handful of dead-ender liberals who will complain, but that would be extremely popular. Democrats, what issues do they have on their side anymore? Most people want some kind of limits on immigration. It's complex, but I think the actions that Trump has said he's going to take, I think as I said, if he overreaches, if he really means mass deportations, which I don't think he does, but if he should, that could be problematic. I think it's one of those things where, be careful what you ask for. And if they're going into schools and churches and dragging people out wholesale, that could stem the tide. But overall, the issue of tariffs is tricky. It sounds good to many people that, you're going to protect American businesses, but it's also going to hurt American businesses. It's going to hurt people. Things will cost more. It's unclear how far he's going to go with these things he says he's going to do, but absolutely, if he ends up ending the Ukraine war, he's golden.
Yeah.
And the Democrats do not have a leg to stand on. Because I'll tell you something else about Americans. It was popular to help Ukraine in the beginning, but now it's 3 years ago, and people have short memories. Um, and all of the war propaganda has diminished. So I don't think it's a winner for Democrats anymore. To when people are complaining about the fires in Los Angeles, which will cost billions of dollars, or the storm effects in places like North Carolina last year, people who never got enough help. And they point to, you see little memes saying, just change the name of North Carolina to Ukraine and then you'll get money. So that would be a huge problem for Democrats, and it would be a huge win for Trump if he were, in fact, to end U.S. support for this effort.
I think he also obliterated the so-called left flank of the Democratic Party. Bernie, a guy who people used to think have some respect for, and Bernie's running around. APAC literally had an advertisement with Bernie in it saying we can't have a ceasefire because it'll help Hamas. Hamas, and he went on, and then Bernie at some point realized, oh my God, I'm being obliterated on Twitter, and then he does a 180. Oh no, we need to stop this, right? And then we've got to go against Putin, him and AOC and all these. We've got to stand up against Putin. We had Jamal Bowman, who, like an idiot, lost, who once said, somebody asked, he said, well, we got to support Ukraine. And they asked him, do you know anything about Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine and the Donbass? He says, no, I'll have to study up on that. But he knew he had to give him money, but he didn't know anything about the conflict, right? So these people make themselves look like idiots, and he still got double-crossed, which he deserved. The so-called left flank of the Democratic Party has been exposed as shills, as puppets, as just absolutely the worst of it. There's anyway, Margaret, AOC, Bernie, and the so-called squad.
Well, as you point out, I like your Bernie impersonation, by the way. Bernie, he talks big when the Democrats are out. But when Biden was in, when people needed somebody like him to push, everybody talked about pushing Biden left, and which was always a joke to me. He always defended Biden. He always defended the administration when he had the ability to push back and make them do things they didn't want to do. He just went along. And now the Democrats are out completely. Now he's talking big. He's talking about billionaires and oligarchs as if there aren't any billionaires who back Democrats. And he just looks silly. But the left, the issue for people on the left is about electoral politics, because we have parties that make no room for the left. None. They're co-opted. They're crushed. If you're just a little bit left, they end up getting rid of you. They got rid of Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. AIPAC got rid of them, bragged about getting rid of them. So, I'm not spreading a lie or a rumor or anything. They bragged about it. But both of them went down the line with Ukraine. I don't know if you saw Cori Bush's interview with Michael Tracy, where he asked her, he said, well, why did you give all that money? She's supposed to be a progressive, the squad, blah, blah. He said, but you supported all that money for Ukraine. And her answer was, it's very lame. It was, she said, well, I was convinced Biden said that he'd have to send U.S. troops to Ukraine and black and brown people would suffer. Well, her role as an alleged progressive is to say, why would any U.S. troops have to go to Ukraine? That should be it. There was a tentative effort to ask for a ceasefire or peace talks of some kind. Progressives all signed a letter, and then when Biden dropped the hammer on them, they denounced themselves a day later. So it's very sad. What passes for the left. I think I'll put it that way. What passes for the left in U.S. electoral politics is it's very sad indeed, because at the end of the day, they're co-opted too. They talk a good game when they're running, and they'll say, I don't accept corporate donations, but then you end up voting the same way as people who do accept corporate donations. So what's the big deal? And, and then they give in. But as you said, when they want to take them out, they do it anyway. So we don't have a left. We have some liberalish reformers in electoral politics, and that's about it.
Well, here's the other thing, and there's various problem solving models. I used to teach various ones, and one of them define, but it starts off with the acronyms define. The D is define the problem, right? Okay, you're the Democratic Party, and you need to regroup. What's the problem? Black men are a bunch of misogynists, sexist, and they wouldn't vote for her. Well, what about the white people that wouldn't vote for her? Well, they're racist and sexist. Well, what about the Latinos that either stayed home or voted for Trump? I love this one. Chuck Fraud was went on to say, well, they come from a lot of countries like Venezuela, where there's strong men and authoritarianism. So the discussion of democracy doesn't really work on them. Okay, so let me understand this. The Latinos are a bunch of people who hate democracy and they want dictators. The black men are misogynists and sexist. The problem is the Democrats are so good and virtuous. That's why they lost. Doesn't that remind you of like an employment interview and somebody says, what's your biggest weakness? And the person says, I just work too hard. I just try too much. I'm just too good. And you're like, come on, dude, you're laying it on too little. That's the way, you know what I mean? It's that mentality. Why'd you lose? Because we stand up for the minorities in democracy. And these stupid, authoritarian, misogynist, racist minorities just don't understand that. They don't even want that anymore. They don't have a way out. If even when they lose, they have to use identity politics and blame the voters and attack the very voters. And it is the moral failings of the voters. That's why they lost, Margaret.
I was having this discussion / argument with a friend yesterday who went on and on and on about how racist white people are, and that's why Trump won. And she was so sad. It was a sad day, and we're having this. Trump is back because white people, believe in racial superiority, and they don't listen to anything else, and that's the only reason Trump is president. Well, I'm not going to say there aren't any racists in America. That would be stupid. I'm not going to. Basically, Mr. Racial Jungle. Remember that? The countries are going to be a racial jungle. Yes. And I'm not going to say that none of Trump's appeal is racist. That clearly is untrue. But it lets one of my problems is that lets the Democrats off the hook. They weren't. So Trump was the only one running. Kamala Harris had more money than Trump, $1 billion. And they couldn't convince people who voted for Biden to vote for her. And so while I think it is valid to point some of that out, but to turn it into a failing on the part of millions of people, and to not even pretend, not even say, we've got to look at things, we've got to change things, we have to say where we went wrong. We're going to talk to people, and we're going to find out how to get folks back. Something like that, something akin to that. Of course, they'll never do it. The gravy train continues for some of these folks, the pundits and the heads of the NGOs and the members of Congress. They're good. And actually, if because they're out of power in Congress, they don't have to do anything. So they can just sit back and relax and hope Trump makes a mistake, and that's it. And all the people they claim to care about will live with the effects of whatever it is that Trump does. So it's very sad to me. And it's even sadder to me, not that the Democratic establishment won't own up to their failings, but that there are so many in the rank and file who continue to defend them. I've asked people, I'm like, aren't you angry with them? Don't you have questions for them? Nope. No, this is the good party. That's the racist party. That's the bad party. This is the good party, and there's nothing for me to say. I guess it's too much cognitive dissonance for people. I guess that can be difficult to try to, hold two ideas in your head at the same time. I support this party, even though they've screwed me again. I guess that's too hard for people, because then if you acknowledge their failings, then you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do? And if you think there's no alternative except to continue supporting Democrats, that messes with people's heads. And so they're let off the hook again. And so I want to caution people. You can't just talk about how racist people are. You can't just talk about why Democrats lost Latino votes again. First of all, Latino people need to be part of that conversation. I can't talk about why Kamala Harris still got a majority of Latino votes, but it was a small majority. It's like 52% or something like that. It goes down and down and down. Have that conversation with them, with that community. Ask them, what are they looking for? What do they need? What made her not an attractive candidate? So I just would tell people, you can't just talk about racism. You cannot. It's then you don't have a political argument at all of any kind about Trump's victory was not inevitable. That's another thing that I keep telling people. If you say that, you're saying there was no way to prevent this outcome, that it was inevitable that Trump would win, and that's simply not true. And there's no reason to let these people off the hook who are the authors of their own defeat.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Let me ask you this. They put forward Joe Biden. But this guy, stumbles, obviously, and I mean that both literally and otherwise. He stumbles around, he falls. They bring out Kamala Harris, and I look at her and I'm like, she's one of the stupidest people. I mean, let's be frank, she's stupid, really, really, really exceptionally stupid, right? And you just think to yourself, where is a party when they put forward Joe Biden and they have to pretend that he's okay? We're all looking at it and we're saying, there's something wrong with this guy. We're looking at videos of him. We're looking at him. He's confused. He's wandering around. He is in significant and precipitous decline, right? And then they bring her on and she can't answer a question and she's confused all the time and she's babbling incoherently with the same old hackneyed cliches and tropes. But they're telling us, oh, she's smart. She's this. They're gaslighting us about how wonderful she is, right? When you got a party that they create a narrative about a candidate that's frighteningly unqualified and try to push it forward like we're supposed to believe that. They're not even a party anymore. You know what I mean? It's like somebody pointing to a tree and I say, oh, that's a nice tree. No, Garland, that's a motorcycle. I can see it's a tree. No, you're mistaken. You're a sexist, evil, misogynist, anti-trans guy. Otherwise, you would know that tree is a motorcycle. You know what I mean? That's like if somebody points to the glaringly obvious and says, you're putting candidates in front of me that are either incompetent or mentally impaired, and you bring that up. They attack you for that rather than admit that. What do you have? Is this even a party that's left?
No, it's like a Democratic Party is like an influence peddling operation. I feel like all of that's what American politics is pretty much. Congress is like a big money laundering operation. This I believe in 2020 when Biden won, I think they got lucky.
Well, if it wasn't for COVID, he wouldn't have won. People were scared.
Exactly.
People were upset. COVID was going on. People were arguing about what the government's policy should or shouldn't be. There was a lot of disarray. And I think they were able to take advantage of the disarray and hide Joe Biden because of COVID. They used that as an excuse to keep him from in front of the camera.
Well, but it's funny. In 2020, millions of people looked at Biden and said, he isn't well. And What did they do? They had this huge propaganda campaign to try to tell us he just had a stutter. And I said, wait a minute. I've been looking at Joe Biden since the 70s. I don't remember him ever having a stutter. If he can't get the words out, it's part of the decline he's going through. But they convinced us or convinced enough people that it was a stutter and wanted to get rid of Trump that he managed to win that election. I assumed he would be a one-term president. It did not occur to me that they would try to run him for re-election. And they made the issue about his age. And the issue wasn't his chronological age, it was his health, which was obviously not good. The verbal miscues, the shaking hands with invisible people, the weird inappropriate statements, the weird outbursts, all of it did not, I mean, it's an understatement to say that does not give one confidence. But they stuck with him. He was doing very badly in the polls. His approval ratings were not near 50%. But they chose to, nobody wanted to tell grandpa to turn in the keys. I suspect he didn't want to go, and they didn't know what to do. So they stuck with him. They had this debate, which was he face planted, of course. Then there's a panic. We got to get rid of him, or a plan to use that to get rid of him. And they thought that the vice president, as you describe her, also doesn't inspire confidence. The word salads, I always found that so odd because politicians tend to be very glib. Biden was in his younger days when he was, healthier. They tend to be very glib and they can talk about anything off the cuff, but she never could. I mean, it was just basic stuff. I don't know if it's insecurity. I don't know what it was, but she did not inspire any confidence and nobody voted for her. There was no, you can overlook the flaws. I think about George W. Bush. He's stupid, but he won his primary. So, Republicans said they wanted him. Whatever you want to say about Trump, he won 2 primary processes. She didn't win anything except, Democratic Party insiders and fundraisers who wanted to push her through. And I remember, several. I'm thinking of the time she was being interviewed on Oprah, and she, suddenly they were saying she's a gun owner. Do you remember that? That was the hot thing. I'm a gun owner. I believe in the Second Amendment. She goes on Oprah and says, if anybody breaks into my house, they're going to get shot. It was just stupid. It was embarrassing. She would have friendly interviews like with Stephen Colbert, and he asked her a very simple question. So, how are you different from Joe Biden? And she looks panicked and then says, well, I'm not Donald Trump. Well, that's not an answer to the question. So of course it was doomed to fail. Her, candidacy was doomed to fail. And of course she did. And to your point, this is not the party that can claim the moral high ground. They lied to people about Joe Biden's health. Then it was clear he wasn't healthy. Then they tried to shoehorn her in at the last minute, give her tons of money, and she still lose. She got, I think, almost 7 million fewer votes than Biden got. And they don't want to investigate why. It's left to us to argue with each other because, this political party isn't really a political party. So that's, yeah, I feel like I rambled a bit, so I hope I answered your question.
No, I'm with you. So looking forward, parties take a position. And again, the Republican Party, we know who they are. Oh, come on, they're pretty open to who they are. They're the party of the wealthy, and they've been, a lot of positions, which are kind of weird because some of the positions they traditionally held, Trump is kind of, seems like he's not taking, I don't even know what goes next, but you have to have some kind of a sound footing if you're going to oppose Trump. Remember before they were the resistance and Trump was a bad, evil guy and he was a Putin bot, or they had a few things. They didn't make much sense, but they had some ground to put their feet on from which to push against Trump. They're going to go into the Trump's going to be there. Congress is going to come in. There's going to be bills coming in that they're constituents, I use that word charitably because their constituents are all billionaires, but their alleged constituents are going to expect them to oppose. Based on what you're seeing of the Democrats now, what solid ground do they put their feet on? I mean, how do they even oppose Trump? How do they take any positions? How do they articulate a vision? I mean, where are they starting from January and going forward in this new Trump administration?
Well, they're going to be looking for a new Obama. They're going to be looking for a new face, that can capture the public imagination. Will they succeed? I don't know. I've already seen they want to run Gavin Newsom, but this issue of the fires in Los Angeles, rightly or wrongly, he's getting some of the blame. So I don't know how successful that will be.
Wes
Uh,
Moore, this guy in Maryland, who they love now, but this guy, yeah, he's
I
just
don't,
another clone. You know what I mean? What is he?
basically.
He's another, like, what do they call them? That Obama and the ones that go to England for to go to Oxford and all that. The something scholar, I forgot. Obama was
Oh,
one.
he's a Rhodes Scholar,
He's another Rhodes
Westmore.
Scholar.
Well, that's
He was
nice.
in you know what I mean? He's just another clone of the fake black person that they use, so they want him. You know, let me throw this at you. Do you see any way going into 2028, going into the midterms, whatever, that the Democrats can have a legitimate primary process where they allow the people to choose, where they're likely to choose somebody who's a lot closer to Bernie than they are to Biden? You know, Bernie's stated policies, you know, if you know what
Right,
I'm
right,
saying.
right.
Can they even, I've been arguing they can't. Can you even see how they could have a legitimate primary and allow the constituents to choose? Because the truth is, if they allowed the Democratic constituents to choose and somebody was there, they'd probably choose somebody that wouldn't be all that bad a candidate. Maybe not a good candidate, but you know what I'm saying. Let me
Yeah,
put it
the
a different way.
people.
They choose someone that the donors don't want. That's the way I put it.
Yeah, they'd have to rig it against, the Bernie-like person who ran, or you get somebody like an AOC who has that reputation but isn't really to the left at all. So that's their conundrum. I don't even think they want primaries. They changed the schedule to make sure nobody could run against Biden. Um, then they choose Kamala Harris and, don't even go through the motions of choosing anyone else. So they have a problem. They'll have to get somebody somebody Obama-like, who's slick enough to appear to be a progressive when they really aren't. But who can pull that off? That's very rare to get someone with those skills. They're hoping lightning will strike twice, and they will be able to do that again. But it's funny, whenever people talk about future elections, I always say to myself, I thought Trump was going to make sure there weren't any elections. I thought, that was one of the things. This is going to be the last election we have if Trump wins. And I was like, oh, actually, so we're talking about elections? So I guess that wasn't true, like Trump being Hitler, at any rate. So that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to find or cultivate a new face. And but it's the same people in control. They got rid of Biden when the money people said you have to get rid of them. That's when they did it. So we know who's in control of the Democratic Party. We know, everybody's now talking about, all these billionaires supporting Trump, and Bezos had a good seat, and what's his name, the Facebook guy Zuckerberg, all these rich people, Elon Musk, he's supported by billionaires. Well, who do you think the Democrat? They would have been if it was Kamala Harris. They'd have been at her inauguration. They don't care. So we still have that problem of having an electoral process that's controlled by people with money, by corporations, by the military industrial complex, still controlled by Wall Street. All of these people have a Congress. People. I was having this discussion with someone about AIPAC's influence. And I said, AIPAC owns Congress. We don't. APAC has a Congress, Big Pharma has a Congress, Wall Street, they've got a Congress. All of these people, all of these entities and interests are the ones who control our politics in this country. So the fake left party is having um, a very difficult time competing electorally and trying to convince people that, as you said, that they're the ones with the moral high ground. They're the ones for abortion rights, which it turned out was not something, while people in local elections, most of the time that issue won. All of the referendums on abortion rights, Florida, they actually won, but DeSantis, he said, well, you got to win by 60%, so winning 55% doesn't work. But most of the time, that is what people want. But it doesn't translate into national success. So I don't know where they stand on anything, and that's their problem. They don't stand for anything. It's like, what? If you ask somebody, what does Trump stand for? You could tell them, make America great again, stop immigration. You could very clearly articulate what Trump wanted. If somebody said, what does Kamala Harris want? I wouldn't know what to say. What would you say?
She doesn't know what she wants. So how would I know? That's what I'd say. She has no clue. Well, I would see her as a conduit for power. You know what I mean?
She's a hollow woman. She's clearly an ambitious person whose ambition did not match her political skill. And, so she allowed herself, she had rich friends who kept promoting her, and she allowed them to convince her that she could do things she actually could not do, clearly.
Well, what was I going to ask you? But the other thing is this. They can get, let's face it, the Democrats, they're in identity politics. And so within their party, it seems to me that it is so far away from regular America. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Regular people, they're so far away from it. So it's like Hollywood. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, we're going to run a primary, and we're going to get some, diverse, multi-gendered person of color thingy, whatever. You know what I mean? They're like, that's what they want. And people are like, hey man, I can't pay my bills. They want somebody to be like, hey, you can't pay your bills. Perhaps we should do something. Like, not that he will or won't do it, but Trump would say, well, perhaps we should stop taxing tips or taxing Social Security. Even the conversations, right, that indicated that he had some understanding of the plight of the working class. Not that he was going to do anything about it, but I listened and I'm like, he knows what's pissing people off, right? He knows what's pissing people. I didn't say he's going to do nothing about it, but he knows what's pissing people off. Democrats would just go back to, we're going to have a multi-gendered person of color who's happens to be handicapped, and and they just throw all that stuff out there and then attack you if you don't support them, rather than like any indication that they could hear what the people were saying. Like, it's Hollywood. You know what I mean? They're completely.
But you know what their problem is? If they do what the people want them to do, then they would be turning their back on their donors. If Joe Biden had raised the minimum wage, Kamala Harris would have won. If they had continued some of the COVID programs, she would have won. But the things that, just something basic that actually changes people's lives, that improves people's lives, they did none of that. The COVID programs were temporary, and then poof, they were gone. People who'd been getting Medicaid or SNAP were kicked off. And it didn't matter if they voted for Biden. They're not going to go out and vote for her after they got kicked in the teeth. No minimum wage, no Build Back Better, none of the legislative successes that would get them votes, because the oligarchs don't want it. And they told him, these COVID programs are temporary, but you better get rid of them. You're not going to do that again. So they blame cinema and Manchin. There's always a Manchin in the cinema. Now it seems to be Fetterman. So that's the problem of the Democratic Party. I don't think winning is very hard. Give people things that You you need at least one legislative success that changes people's lives, that improves their lives. Instead, you have them with a stupid effort to sanction Russia's oil, which causes oil and gas prices to rise for everyone. And then you come up with some dumb slogan about Putin's price hike. And when people complain about inflation, you say, well, this indicator shows that the economy's good, and you're too dumb to know that you aren't struggling. So that's the problem. That's the dilemma for the Democrats. They cannot live up to the image they've cultivated for decades, and also get the support of the oligarchy that controls them.
To me, the worst thing what burns me up amongst genocides and other things is what they've done to their base. Here's what I mean. And you were just bringing it up. I have friends, family members, people I know in the Black community that have been Democrats lifelong. Mm-hmm. They're crazed conspiracy theorists. The things, and I know you see it, the things that they believe, I shake my head and say, that makes sense to you? Well, let me tell you why Trump won. And then it's something that has nothing to do. It never has anything to do with the working class. It's something that they heard on MSNBC or CNN. Well, the Russians, this or that. And I'll ask them, so you believe that Russiagate stuff, huh? And I'll ask them one question about it. So tell me about this, huh? They have a superficial understanding of these talking points, right? Mm-hmm. They have turned into the stupidest, the most deluded conspiracy. They were always like, well, what about, the MAGA people and what they call the QAnons? The QAnons.
Everybody's QAnon now.
Anything on the Democratic, and I'm talking about loved ones and family members that I talk to, and they'll say something so absurd about politics that I just go, oh, okay. All right.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the decline of corporate media. If you look at the networks, New York Times, Washington Post, all they do is cover for Biden. So they don't tell people anything they need to know, not even a little bit of criticism or questioning. They just cover for them. So all the traditional sources where I was a kid, but I remember during the Vietnam War when the media began to ask questions. And, I remember someone saying we've lost Walter Cronkite, who this beloved figure in media. There's no one now who says, let's ask some questions about Ukraine. Let's ask questions about Gaza. Nothing. And so people get just propaganda. So that's one thing. It's the dumbing down of the country, the loss of critical thinking skills, which is a bigger issue. But I think the media is to blame. And I think the lack of what we've been talking about, the lack of a real opposition party that speaks for people. So if you want good information, of course, we're both in independent media, you can get it. But you have to look for it. You have to know there's another source. You have to take the time, make the effort to look for information that explains something coherent to you. And most people don't do that. Social media is part of the problem. I remember the internet was supposed to be, this place where you'd get information from a variety of sources. But you've got Facebook censoring and Twitter kicking people off, YouTube censoring, and you get a lot of nonsense. That is promoted endlessly, all kinds of trash and nonsense. So the end result is people who don't know how to think. And so they will fall for anything because the people who used to give them some decent information don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I find if you ask them questions of any depth, they just stare at you. And I think part of it is this. In their circles, nobody would do that. I mean, most of the diehard Democrats still completely, absolutely are convinced about Russiagate. They're 100% convinced about it. Well, Trump's going to do that. I've had people say, well, Trump and Putin are going to do this. And I said, well, I hope Trump does call Putin and end the war. And they look at me. You know what I mean?
I've had to say to people who should know better, it is not a good thing for the president of the United States to not speak to the president of Russia. That is not a good thing. They may disagree. Negotiations may not go the way you want. All sorts of things. But to not talk, no. There's nothing good about that. Just yesterday, I had to say to someone, he says, well, you can't convince me otherwise that Putin didn't put Trump in the White House. And I said, okay, well, you said you didn't want to be convinced, but I'm going to say this anyway. And I went on to talk about how, just to mention one thing, in 2016, towards the end of the campaign, Trump tried to get some deal to have a Trump Tower built in Russia, and he sends this Michael Cohen, his lawyer, to try to contact someone in the Kremlin. He didn't even know who to talk to. I mean, it was just a clown show. It was absurd. And I say to people, if Putin was putting him in office, how does he not know who to contact? How did he go back and forth to Moscow when starting in the days of the Soviet Union and never end up getting a Trump Tower built? That doesn't sound to me like they're helping Trump out. I mean, just to mention one thing, and nobody in all of Mueller's investigation, no one was convicted of colluding with Russia. People were convicted of lying, convicted of tax charges, convicted of everything except colluding with the Russian government. But it was a drumbeat of propaganda, and it has ruined the country. It's ruined the media. It's ruined political discourse. It's ruined people's ability to think, and all the people who pushed it, it's the level of disgrace. It's hard to comprehend, and so people will argue against something sensible. That even during the Cold War, an American president would meet with the head of the Soviet Union, and now that's something that's suspect, when in fact it's something that's could end up with better outcomes.
Meeting with anyone. Oh, you met with Assad, Tulsi Gabbard. That's unacceptable. Oh, he met with Kim Jong-un. That's unacceptable. You know what I mean? Is this neocon thing that says, first of all, we're going to designate the leader of any country that we want to steal all their stuff. They're a dictator. And then you can't meet with dictators. Now you can meet with the president of Saudi Arabia or something like that.
Depends on the dictator.
Yeah, exactly that. So now they're left, I think to me, when I look at them, when I look at the Democratic Party, the analogy that comes to mind is Mike Tyson. When he got knocked out by Buster Douglas, he was laying, I'll never forget, he was laying on there. Do you remember that? And he was disoriented and he was reaching for his mouthpiece, right? That's the infamous picture of a boxer who's disoriented. He's been struck in the head. He's laying there and he doesn't know what else to do. And he's instinctively trying to get his mouthpiece, right? That's where I see the Democratic Party right now. They're laying on the mat looking for, I got to get this mouthpiece and get it back in my mouth and stand back up and fight. But I'm so disoriented that I can't even pick up the mouthpiece, right? And I just see a party that they don't know. They're not even arguing amongst themselves. A little bit of that. But all in all, they seem to be quiet. Like, we got to stand up against Trump. No, I mean, we got to,
well, everything that, as you point out, it was the resistance. I remember the Women's March on Washington and all that stuff. They've just given up because everything they tried was a failure. So actually, it's just as well as they sit down and shut up because they don't know what they're doing. So absolutely, you're absolutely right. They, I guess the people who fund them will keep funding them, I suppose. But
I don't know. Let me tell you, these people are transactional. Well, I don't know if you looked around, Bezos and all these guys that used to be along with the Democratic Party, the head of the guy from India, he was there, the people from these tech companies all over the world, all these billionaire tech companies, all these rich people, many who supported Biden and Harris. Guess what? No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. There's a new king in town. And they were like, yeah, the Democrat. Oh, that's right. You guys lost in a blowout. Trumpy, oh boy.
Well,
How's that aligned with all of those
well, they even
comments
had
under
the
the gun?
TikTok CEO there. After all that talk of the Communist Party controls TikTok and all of that, the guy's sitting up there at the inauguration. Um, I remember when a couple weeks before Election Day, and the Washington Post, which reliably endorses a Democrat, said they weren't going to endorse. So that told me Bezos knew Kamala Harris was going to lose. He says, I'm not backing her when I know Trump is going to end up being the president again. And
Trump's a
people were,
vindictive man. He's a
well,
vindictive man. You really don't.
absolutely. So Bezos, if nothing else, he knew the numbers. He knew it wasn't going to happen. And people were mad and canceling subscriptions and all kinds of foolishness. So in the absence of Democrats showing any signs of life, any signs of electoral success, that's going to continue. But I think it's the people who have to step up and direct these parties. Uh, Whenever there are improvements in our lives, whenever there are struggles which result in the civil rights movement or environmental law, or any number of things, it's because the people are the ones who tell the politicians what to do. And we've got to find a way to go back to that, talk about how do we mobilize for what we want and get them to do the things we need them to do. But they are committed to not doing that. They are committed to not listening to the people. They are committed to crushing anybody who speaks differently. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. These are very interesting times. I guess that's how I can sum up.
Yes, they are quite interesting times. Unless you're a Democrat, then they are truly tragic times. And you know what? Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of genociders.
They
All right,
deserve it.
Margaret Kimberly, where can everybody find you and all of your stuff?
BlackAgendaReport.com every Wednesday. Black Agenda Radio on Friday. I'm on Twitter, X. I keep saying Twitter. At Freedom Ride Blog, and I should promote my book, which I don't even see around me. I'm terrible at book promotion, but I'm the author of. Do you have it?
Oh, no, I don't think it's. I think it's on another.
This is terrible. I'm so bad at this. My book is Prejudice. Oh, you left again.
It's not in here. It's about.
Oh, but thank you anyway. Prejudicial Black America and the Presidents is my book. So thank you so much, Garland.
Well, you know what? Before we got to say this, you got another chapter that you got to write.
Yes, I have to sell more books in order to. It's a complex thing, publishing, but I've got to sell more books in order to. I can finish a Biden chapter and start a new Trump chapter. So that's what I want to do.
Because this is critical. Because what was it? Somewhere around almost 1 in 4 Black men voted for Trump. In some states, I think it was 1 in 5 nationwide. It was, and I think it was a lot of it was economic, because Black men are dealing with a lot of economic pain, desperation. I know some Black men that I talk to, and I would ask them, and they'd say, "Yeah, I'm voting for Trump. Why?" And what I heard more than anything else, almost every time, economic. Well, I'm paying for this, and this is what they would say. Well, when Trump was in, things were a little cheaper. So I don't know if it's going to work, but I'll give it a shot. It was, but you know what, Margaret? My sister's an accountant, and she says this, Garland, it's always about the money.
It is. And Trump is not going to, I don't think, improve anybody's life, but the Democrats failed so badly, so miserably, that people are either out or they're confused and they think Trump is going to do something for them that he isn't going to do. I want to say one more thing. The issue of immigration was huge. And this is something that resonates with a lot of Black people. I think there's a lot of confusion about the role of immigration, and but there is a thinking among many Black people that immigrants are responsible for their economic plight. And I think that was huge as well. And I think Trump's persona resonates with a lot of people. The fact that he said, I don't care what you said about January 6th. I don't care that you found me guilty. I'm running again. And that kind of nerve, the guts, is something that resonates with a lot of people. So I'm not really surprised that he has begun to break that hold of a significant number of black people from the Democratic Party.
Well, I was saying this. Kamala Harris running around saying, well, when I was a prosecutor, trust me, that ain't something that's going to bring you a whole lot of black men to voting. You know
Oh,
what I mean? When I was a prosecutor, we did this and we came down and we stomped them. And every other thing she said was as a prosecutor. And like they went after Trump and Trump said, you know, they charged me unjustly and, you know, I didn't do anything wrong. A lot of black men were like, you know, I got caught with a bag of weed when I was 18. And I still got that on my record today. You know what I mean? They looked at a criminal justice system that they felt was unfair. And when they charged Trump, they're like, hey, I'm familiar with that. You know what I mean? It was just,
I
they
think
just
so.
compounded so many things to make Trump look like a sympathetic figure that the system wanted them, that people who felt that the system was unfair to them really identified with that. They created that dynamic.
And I also think the genocide. If
Oh, yeah.
Biden had ended the genocide, Kamala Harris could have won again. There were millions of people who said, I'm not voting for that. And
Did you see the poll?
yes,
The YouGov poll?
yes. It's all of those things combined to create this failure for a party that deserves failure, but it's not what the people, we deserve better. We deserve electoral politics that meets our needs, and that's not what we have.
Well, Nancy Pelosi said, if the Capitol crumbles around us, we'll be supporting it. Remember that? Well, work for the Democratic Party. If our party crumbles and falls to pieces, we'll still support a genocide in Israel. Man,
Oh,
there you
well,
go. You be careful what you pray for, right? All right.
yes.
Thanks a lot, Margaret Kimberly. BlackAgendaReport.com. That's do you guys have a YouTube? You got a YouTube. Do you have a YouTube?
No, we do not have a YouTube channel, but we're on Twitter. Black Agenda Reports on Twitter. BlackAgendaReport.com. Freedom Ride blog is my handle.
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, I'm not on Twitter, unfortunately, not of my own decision, but you can share this on all your social media platforms. Everybody share it on Twitter and everyone else so people can have an opportunity to see this. Thanks a lot. Oh, by the way, there's a join button there. So click on that and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much.